This is episode number 195. Today we're featuring artist Carole Gray-Weihman.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir Podcast. Hard to believe it's mid-November already. I mean, this is the year that seems to have disappeared. It's unbelievable. But the good news is, I suppose, that most of us got a lot more painting done. I'm scrambling to try and get some pieces to my galleries so that they can take advantage of them for holiday sales. Maybe I can make a little extra Christmas money. Fingers crossed. I've done more outdoor painting this year, I think, than I've done any given year, thanks to COVID and not having a bunch of people around, a lot of distractions. No, it's kind of nice. It's had its benefits in spite of all the downside of it. Anyway, we're still actively trying to be there for you. Speaking of COVID, we started daily broadcast when COVID started, and we've been on every day at 12 noon on Facebook and YouTube, and every day at 3 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. I've been having guests on at 12 noon, demos and things. And then we are offering samples of the 600 plus videos that we've produced over the years that will give you an opportunity to kind of learn and grow as an artist and keep you preoccupied from all the craziness in the world. So check it out. Just go to Facebook or YouTube and search Streamline Art Video. Best way to find it. Couple reminders. The PleinAir Salon Art Competition deadline is a couple of weeks away, the end of the month. Enter your best paintings. And we have lots of categories that might appeal to you, including things that are not plein air. Also, book your seat to Watercolor Live, our virtual online conference with the best artist in the world in watercolor. It's the largest watercolor conference in the world. It's coming up in January. You must not miss this. It's awesome. And a lot of us are kind of turning to watercolor and gouache because we're not wanting to travel with our paints all the time. And I know I am. And so that's one of the reasons I'm really excited about this. Check it out, watercolorlive.com. The deadline for the lowest price is the 30th of November. In the current issue of PleinAir Magazine, which you can find on your newsstand or subscribe at pleinairmagazine.com, our Elements column has advice on capturing the magic of the moment when painting outdoors. And also in our weekly newsletter, we're going to be giving you a sneak peek of some of the inside magazine issues. You don't want to miss that. Coming up after this interview, I'm going to be answering art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute. But first, we'll get right to our interview with Carole Gray-Weihman, who is a Northern California colorist and modern impressionist. Carole Gray-Weihman, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here.
It's great to talk to you. You know, you were there when it all began.
I know. It's crazy. I can't believe how long it's been.
I know. It's crazy. Well, I suppose we should let people in on what the heck we're talking about. Do you want to let them in on it, or do you want me to?
Why don't you start off?
Well,
it was 20 years ago. That I know.
Yes, yeah.
You start the story.
We were both a lot younger, 20 years younger. Well, I had seen an ad in American Art Review, and I had seen it over and over and over and over and over again, many, many years, for Camille and her work. But I did not ever notice anything about workshops. And one day the ad said something about workshops, and I realized that it was in the area I was living. And so I signed up for the workshop, and I ended up going up to Petaluma every week. I lived about an hour away. And every week on Mondays or Tuesdays, I showed up in spite of the fact that I was carrying a full-time job and running a tech company. And I would take these workshops, and that's where you and I met, right?
Yes. And we had no idea what you were doing in your other life, you know.
Well, I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah. You know, you were pretty quiet about your professional life with us. At least in the beginning, you were.
Well, it
Yeah.
certainly didn't serve any purpose to talk about that, I suppose. So anyway, I think what Carole and I are referring to is that once I discovered plein air painting and started seeing people out there painting, I thought, well, maybe there's a movement. And because I made my living as a publisher anyway, I came in and I said, Carole and Camille and I sat around on some chairs or tables or something, and I said, what if I do this thing called PleinAir Magazine? Do you remember that?
I absolutely do.
And you guys probably thought I was crazy.
I thought it was cool. I thought it was time myself. So, yeah, I remember that very well. You know, you're putting the idea out there for us to see how we felt about it, and I was excited about the possibilities. So.
Well, anyway, we pulled it off. So thank you for your help. I know you and Camille both gave me a lot of advice and a lot of encouragement, and I'm still trying to learn how to paint, but at least I can do a pretty good job at a magazine.
You can do an awesome job at a magazine. You can do a pretty good block study too, Eric.
I suppose after all those block studies, I should.
Yeah.
So why don't we don't want to make this about me or about PleinAir Magazine. Let's make it about you. So how did this all begin for you? Because I really don't know. I mean, I met you at Camille's workshop. We became fast friends. I don't think I met you at Camille's workshop.
Yeah, do you think we met before that?
Yeah, I think we met. I know we did because we met at the Plein Air Painters of America did a thing in Connecticut.
Yes.
And that's where I think I first met you.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
because that was before, I don't know, that seems to me like it was before I was studying with Camille.
Oh, wait a minute, though, Eric.
Wait a minute.
You know what I did? You know what I did in Lyme, Connecticut? This is Lyme, right?
Yeah.
I wrote an article for PleinAir Magazine.
Oh,
while
well,
I was there.
I guess then I'm wrong. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So PleinAir Magazine was in existence. So I'm pretty sure, it was the Monday classes.
The first thing to go is the memory, they say, right? Well, the second thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, you're right, because you did. I had forgotten that. Wow, you have a terrific memory. Well, anyway, we did reconnect there, and that was a lot of fun. But it was events like that. I think the first one I went to, I think that was the first one I ever went to. Any kind of I went to the Scene on the Straight. That's where I kind of learned about plein air,
Right.
and I ended up seeing Laguna quite by accident. I went down there, and I had brochures for this new magazine and that I was going to launch, and it had a completely different logo and had a Camille image on the cover. So anyway, I should find all that stuff, and we'll put it in the museum, whatever museum that is.
Yeah, and I think you probably remember Lyme, Connecticut, because it was so much fun.
It was fun.
Yeah, and that's when we really connected.
Probably
was on that trip. So the Monday classes were pretty short and quick, and we didn't hang out at all. So in Lyme, we got a chance to really get to know each other a little bit better, and hang out with friends. And it was so inspiring. I'll never forget that trip.
Yeah, that was a fabulous trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my first instructor was Joe Paquette. I think we did half days with different instructors.
Right.
And I think the first one I took there was Joe Paquette. I remember studying with Ned Mueller. I don't remember who else. I mean, I remember many who were there. I mean, it was, many of the greats from the Plein Air Painters of America. But anyway.
Right. And that was the first time I really got to know Ray Roberts.
Really?
That was my first workshop with him.
Huh.
And I've known, I'm real close with Ray. Ray and Peggy, they've been in my life for about at least 15 years now. We visit each other a lot and work together. So,
yeah.
But so very memorable for me, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and such great people.
Mm-hmm.
So you were painting before you studied with Camille?
Yes, and a lot of people don't know what I was doing before Camille. Just a lot of people think it just all started with Camille, but I was really passionate with painting long before that, before I even found plein air painting. And I was pretty young. I was sort of trying to find my path. But I was really inspired by abstract expressionism before. And so this was back in the mid-'90s. And I was drawn to expressionism, but also neo-expressionism. I don't know if you've heard that term or know that term. And for your listeners who don't know, it's the neo-expressionists. That period came about as like a reactive period, a rebellious angst over minimal art. That's how it began, and artists were not into the art that was so popular in the 70s. So the works that were created out of that period, I was so drawn to because they were very abstract, loosely painted, but with some recognizable objects that I could grasp. So I loved abstract, but I needed some element of something I understood. So I was really drawn to that movement, and I drew a lot of inspiration from like the German expressionist painters, like Kirchner, and even Munch, even though my work doesn't look anything like it today, but the Bay Area figurative school as well. So I was particularly drawn to Richard Diebenkorn's work, and maybe a little bit of Elmer Bischoff too.
I love Bischoff.
And and I found somebody locally. His name was Horst Trave, and a lot of people don't know who he was. He passed away probably about maybe 10 years ago. He passed away, but he was part of that movement of the San Francisco School of Abstract Expressionism, and he was living in Healdsburg at the time, just a 30-minute drive from me. And I found his work advertised somewhere. He didn't promote himself very well, so a lot of people didn't know about him. But I arranged a meeting with him in his studio.
Cool.
Yeah, and as soon as I got there and met him, I was immediately just moved and drawn to everything he was doing and everything he was about. And I was getting ready to mentor under him. And I was 28 at the time. And I just thought my path was becoming more and more clear. So a little background on him and why I was so moved by his work is, so he was at the forefront at the San Francisco Expressionist movement. So many art students at that time were searching for something more meaningful, like more cathartic with their work. And so this is the movement that Richard Diebenkorn was, I think, the leader of. I guess I can safely say that. And so many of the students from that period, they were actually ex-soldiers from the war. And they made the meaning behind the movement all the more meaningful because these were artists that were trying to recover from post-traumatic stress, and they were using art as a means to put their emotions on canvas. So all of these PTSD subjects were expressed in their paintings, and it was just a release for them. Their work was so emotionally charged. So what culminated from that time were just so many paintings of where things like anger or disgust were depicted. And
So that really appealed to you. You like anger and disgust?
I do.
Were you?
I do.
I guess this is the time for my psychology degree to kick in. So
Yeah.
tell me about how you felt about your mother.
About my mother? That's funny.
Well, what was attracting you? What was you were obviously dealing with something.
Yes. Well, I mean, aren't we all a little bit? I just at that time in my life, I had this deep appreciation for that kind of work. It just was so emotional. I was so drawn to the emotional aspect of it. But also that whole movement, what I learned about that movement, which intrigued me, and which I saw in this artist that I met in Healdsburg, was that they were so entrenched in camaraderie with one another and sharing ideas openly with each other. And so they used this movement as a way to move through and process all this stuff that they were experiencing. I mean, this was right after the war, so there was a lot going on. The world was a little bit in chaos at this time, and so I was intrigued. I was really intrigued about the concepts behind the creation of the work. And so important to note, or at least for myself, is that all these ideas, they're coming back to me full circle now. Right now.
How so?
Well, it's
You can't get political though.
No, I don't want to get political, but things are pretty chaotic right now.
Yeah.
And so I feel that transition. I feel it coming all right back to me. But now I'm using my PleinAir experience and sort of melding it back into the little experience I got. It wasn't that part of my life didn't last very long, where I was really working at the abstract expressionist.
But it had an impact on you.
It certainly did.
Yeah. So you were about to go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was something I sort of abandoned.
Yeah.
I mean, I just dropped it the moment I met Camille. So it just went out the window. I didn't go back to it.
Well, Camille's not exactly a rule follower, is she?
Not really. No, I wouldn't call her that.
No. So you started to study with this guy, and then you said something happened. Is that the point at which you connected with Camille? Yes.
I didn't even formally start studying with him. I was about to, and what happened? What happened was, I think this was in 1996.
Right.
One morning, I didn't know who Camille was, even though she lives 15 minutes from me. I had no idea who she was, never seen her work, never heard her name. But one morning I was reading the San Francisco Chronicle, and a photo of a painting jumped out at me, and it immediately grabbed my attention. I had a familiar response to, the abstract expressionist, how my attention was so focused on that. There was a familiar reaction I had to her painting, even though it wasn't abstract. It was actually had a lot of abstract elements to it, but it was a scene that she painted in France, and it was full of color. And so they printed this image of her painting in full color on the in the travel section. Took up half a page, so it was a nice big painting, and it had her name under it. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. It's just an article about European travel, and then in a little snippet sidebar, it mentioned she was teaching in France, teaching workshops. So I just immediately, it was just a reaction. I put the paper down, picked up the phone, called the reserve, 3 workshops, all the workshops she was teaching. I could only get in 2. One of them was full, but I had 2 full weeks with her in France, studying. And, I had never gone outdoors to paint ever. I didn't know what plein air painting was. I did know, but I had never experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what I was doing. But while I was there, that's all it took. I was addicted. That was it. That was over. My life.
It tends to happen, doesn't it? It's plein air painting is the opioid of art.
Yes. So everything changed.
Probably a bad analogy.
No, it's true.
So what you kind of moved in lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, when I went there, you were sharing a studio with Camille. You obviously took it all in and became very engaged in her teaching and her methods and so on. Tell me about that.
Well, when she was teaching in France, she kept telling me, you got to come to my Monday class. This is nothing like how I teach, because she was hired by somebody who was really interested in creating workshops that were a little bit more romantic. You know what I mean? Like getting outdoors and painting landscape and not being rigorous study.
Yeah.
So my actual first impression was a little bit off. like it was so wonderful. It was, a bit of vacation for me and just trying something new. And then when I came back home and she urged me to get into her Monday classes, I was like, wow, what's this about? She was teaching the Hawthorne-Henchy approach, as you know, and she was fresh out of that training at this time. She had only, I think she'd only been teaching about 3 years
mm-hmm.
at this time. So I entered into Camille's life just before she decided to take on painting as a full-time career.
She was an illustrator, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So she was blazing a trail. I mean, Camille, back in those days, she was full of passion, or she still is, but it was a little bit different back in those days because she was just starting out, so she was more rigid in her approach. And there was something about that. You're going to think there's something wrong with me because I like dark paintings and rigid training, but there was something about that I was really drawn to.
Well, she was probably, I think she was very rigid even when I studied with her. And I kept saying, I want to go out and paint. I want to go paint something. And she said, no, we're going to paint blocks.
Right.
And she was insistent that we paint blocks. And I remember thinking, I drove there every week after week, probably 2 years in a row. And I remember thinking, it's like, I'm so sick of painting these blocks. And yet there was a moment in time, and it took a while, as it does, but there was a moment in time when all of a sudden the angels were singing, and all of a sudden I could see color. And it was that block training that really did that.
Yes.
But she knew you just had to keep persisting on that until you caught it.
Right. I mean, I did that. I was with her every Monday for 10 years. And it wasn't until year 5 that I started doing landscapes. So 5 years of blocks and round objects. I got to do the advanced still. But it was pretty intense. I wouldn't trade it for a heartbeat, though. I love that foundation I got.
It's fabulous, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I think for the benefit of the listener, we need to explain what the heck these blocks are because a lot of people don't know. Do you want to take it on?
Yeah, I think speaking about Henschel a little bit, who started this process. Speaking about him would help introduce this a little bit. So Henschel, he studied with Charles Hawthorne, but he went to the Art Institute of Chicago first. He had a lot of training. Was just like as a teenager, right out of school, he entered into Art Institute of Chicago. Ended up leaving the institute because he learned about Charles Hawthorne. Sort of sounds familiar with something I did, but he was immediately drawn to Hawthorne. I think Henschel was around 19 when he started taking classes with Hawthorne, so very young. And he also studied with George Bellows. By the way, a lot of people don't know that he studied with George Bellows.
Cool.
And George Bellows, he was a former student of William Merritt Chase. So Hawthorne studied with Chase, and so did George Bellows. So Henschel got two different approaches from that training that he had. I'll speak a little bit about Chase because he's pretty important in this as well. But Henschel meeting Hawthorne, I liken it to my meeting Horst Trabe or my meeting Camille. It just changed his life. He never went back to art school. Once he met Hawthorne, he became obsessed with studying under him.
Kind of like you did with Camille.
Exactly. And he committed himself to just serious study and was Hawthorne's protege for, I think, 11 years. I think, if I remember correctly, Hawthorne passed away after 11 years of Henschel working with him. So just a bit of background on Hawthorne and Hawthorne's teacher, William Merritt Chase. William Merritt Chase was a lot of artists must know who he is because he was just a phenomenal teacher. He did so much teaching in his career. But he was teaching at the Shinnecock Hills Summer School in Long Island. Mm-hmm. And he also founded the Chase School of Art. That became Parsons School of Design. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but Chase was teaching also at the same time as Robert Henry. So those two were sort of rivals a little bit. A lot of people know who Robert Henry is, or should know if they don't. But so Chase was considered kind of more of a tonalist painter, but he added color to his tonal paintings. So he used a bit of black in his work, and I was trained without using black. That was a big no-no for me.
For many.
Yeah. But Chase was certainly attracted to color, and he was definitely attracted to Impressionism, but he didn't really have the system in which to teach it. And so Chase was working around the same time that Monet was, and Monet wasn't interested in teaching. He had to shoo away all the eager American students who wanted to study with him. It was funny when I read about this a long time ago. He really hated Americans.
Well, how did Robinson get in there, I wonder?
Oh gosh, connections. There, a few people slipped in, and made connections with Monet, but he really didn't. He really wasn't interested in teaching, not at all. So Chase, he did instill impressionistic style into his paintings as a direct influence of Monet, but his paintings were overall they were a little bit heavier in tone. Mm-hmm. than what we typically know as Impressionism. I'm not really familiar with the actual interactions that took place between the two of them, Chase and Monet, but the French Impressionists had a lot of help from an art dealer who brought their work to the U.S. and exhibited in New York in the 1880s.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the time when Chase really took notice, and he started painting more and more landscapes and getting outdoors and trying to develop his more impressionistic style. So that was at the height of when Chase was doing that. So French Impressionism actually was way more popular here in the U.S. than it was in France, which is interesting. It wasn't until later that it became, much more appreciated in France. So the artists, the young American artists, they were just intrigued. They're like, what's going on here? They wanted to know more about this light and color in these airy paintings. And so Hawthorne, who studied under Chase, he's the one that started to develop more of a teaching method. And that helped the concepts of understanding what was happening with, the light and the shadow outdoors. But it was Henchy, under him, who's the one that really expanded upon it and started introducing the blocks. Henchy wanted to simplify the instruction a little bit further.
Okay, but you need to explain what the blocks are. Okay.
Well, yeah. So Henchy would paint a bunch of wooden blocks, all these different colors, and muted colors, gray colors, neutrals, and bright, bold, saturated colors. And there would be dozens of them, and he'd set up still lifes, like just tables outdoors, and set these up for the beginner students and teach what happens to a color when light hits it. And what's really exciting about this, it sounds a little bit boring and tedious, but once you start to see what happens to color in different atmospheric conditions, it's exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I think even the first one being white. When you see the effects of white, that's huge. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I try to teach, which I didn't really have actually. Camille, I don't know. She, of course, explained what happens to white in the light, of course, but we never painted like all white objects. At least maybe she's been teaching that more recently, but I'm intrigued with trying to differentiate the colors between all these different variations of white. That's the biggest challenge of all. And the first person who brought that up to me was Joseph Mendez. Was try painting a whole white still life, everything white.
Yeah.
And it's pretty exciting when you start to see all the color in white. Yeah.
Well, Whistler did this painting. I think it was called Woman in White or Girl in White. It was just everything was white in the painting, and it was just it really does teach you how much color there is. And that was the thing that was so eye-opening to me is when Camille put a block out there and blocks of other color, all of a sudden you saw how the effects of light, you could see the colors of white in the shadow, you could see the color of the sun and the warmth of the sun on the highlighted, the top plane. You could see the reflected light, the impact of reflected light from another color on the side of the block. It really is a terrific thing, and it's something that I think everybody should try. It's one thing to lay a white sheet of paper, just take a piece of copy paper and lie it on the ground and have half of it in light and half of it in shadow, just so you can see the color of shadow on white. But to do it, to do the block studies, really, really worthwhile. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see more people doing it.
Oh, great. Yeah. Oh, me too, for sure. I mean, I still teach it. I don't teach exactly like Camille, but I absolutely incorporate the blocks in my teaching. So yeah, Camille is a great foundation for me, but my training comes from so many different artists combined. So the way that I teach is sort of a mixture of what I learned from the Bongard School through Joseph Mendez and
well, talk to me about that. So I didn't realize that you had done the Bongard School. Did you actually go down and study with Sergei, or was that through Joseph?
Sergei had already passed away. I just, I was born a little bit too late. No,
you were born at the perfect time. Just accept it.
Oh, there's so much great stuff going on. But there's so much great stuff going on now.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I wish I could have met Henshi and Bongard, but no, I studied with some of Bongard's students. Some people who put a lot of time in with Bongard, or or just a couple of workshops, and I was fascinated with that as well, and I realized the similarities. I mean, I think it was absolutely perfect that after about 5 years with Camille, I ventured out and found Joseph through Camille. I mean, we brought him. We did some work together here in Petaluma with Joseph, and so I think it was just the perfect blend for me, because Joseph was saying the same things, just teaching it a little bit in a different way, and they had a lot of similarities, Henshi and Bongard, and they were both teaching at the same time, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. Who knows if they knew about each other? I don't know. But the teachings were very, very similar. It's just that Bongard was more known for his more expressive, more alla prima works, and Henshi was more about the study and really developing the subtle color variations and working on canvases over and over and over again.
Well, both of them had the reputation of being, what was the term you used earlier? They were very tough on their students. Bongard would walk up to a student and completely humiliate them and sometimes scrape down their canvases.
Right. Very strict, very, very rigid. And Joseph was pretty strict too, with me at least. I don't know how he was with everybody else, but he was very strict. And by then I had a pretty tough skin after 5 years with Camille, so I could handle it. But it's funny. I remember my very first workshop with Joseph down in Southern California, and he knew I had been painting with Camille for 5 years, and we went out to paint a landscape, and I'm struggling with a cloud. I was painting a cloud in a landscape, and he comes along, and I said to him, I've never painted a cloud before. And he said, what, 5 years with Camille, you've never painted a cloud? He was just flabbergasted about that. But yeah, I had to explain, I'm pretty good at painting blocks, though. But yeah, anyway. Those two schools, the Bongard School, Hawthorne Henshi School, absolutely love what came out of those schools. And Bongard taught a lot of people that you and I know, like not just Joseph, but Gay Falkenberry and Ned Mueller and Dan Pinkham.
Well, Bongard came out of I think he was from Kiev, if I remember correctly, and so he came out of the Russian school and the Russian training, and he would have been kind of Soviet era or pre-Soviet era. So the influences there had to be staggering. But
Absolutely.
I'll have to check with my friends in Russia, but I don't remember anybody who was really focusing on a colorist thing. There may have been some influence of Feshen, but Feshen really wasn't all that colorful, was he? He was kind of more gray. So,
right. Yeah, he was a student. He was a student of Kotov, Peter Kotov, who studied under Feshen.
Okay, all right.
So there is some, Feshen made it into everybody's world, I think. He taught a lot of people who went on to teach a lot of great artists.
Yeah.
But there is some influence for sure, Feshen influence. You can kind of see it in his brushwork. Sergei's brushwork was just phenomenal.
Well, and Feshen was a student of Ilya Repin, or as they say over there, Rapin. And so that's pretty impressive lineage.
Yeah. But the time, boy, there was a lot happening in Europe at that time when Sergei was young, and both Feshen and Sergei had to escape because of the war, World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So Sergei ended up going to Germany, I believe. Feshen went. I think they both ended up in Germany, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure if I remember this right, but Sergei came to the U.S. in the 40s.
So that would be the connection, because Chase studied in Munich, and Dubenek and Twachtman were in Munich as well. So maybe there was someone in Munich who was teaching those guys or working with those guys, and or maybe they had an influence. It'd be interesting to see. It's fun to look at the lineage and the artists and see where they cross-pollinate from one artist to another. There's so many artists, for instance, in the lineage of Jerome, and it's just, and it's fun to look at how many people, and you can see the influences way back.
Right, for sure. I mean, and look at Twachtman's work. Oh my gosh, Chase and Twachtman, I know they were friends. They must have, I think Twachtman maybe influenced Chase quite a bit later on, when Chase started becoming a little more impressionistic. I mean, that's just my guess, just by studying their works. But Sergei, I mean, I love his story. Him coming to the U.S. He started out in Tennessee. I don't know if many people know that. He was trying to make a living just painting portraits. And then he was really drawn to the West. He wanted to get into painting Western motifs, but he didn't quite, he ended up moving west.
He ended up in Idaho or something, I think.
Yeah, he was in California for a while first, and then he bought a lot of, I don't know how many acres, a big piece of land in Idaho where he built artist studios there. And so a lot of painters I know of today that are working today took workshops with him there. He would have these summer workshops in Idaho, but he painted regular weekly classes in L.A. in Feshen's old studio. I know he took over Feshen's old studio down in I can't remember the name of the town, but somewhere down there in L.A. And that's where I believe. I'm not sure where a lot of these painters are today, where they actually spent time with Sergei, but I'd love to have a conversation with Ned Mueller about it. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to Ned Mueller about his training, but Sergei's definitely influence on his work. I mean, you can see, I love Ned Mueller's work. You can see it in his color and his brushwork.
Yeah, also in his portraiture, you can really see those influences.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been terrific so far. Let's move on, because I want to make sure we have time to cover some of the other things that you're doing. What are you focusing on now? Are you mostly teaching? What are you painting now? Help us understand what your current path is.
Well, I'm not, because of the pandemic, I'm not doing anything in person right now, but I do teach regularly, and as soon as we get through this phase, I'll be teaching workshops again, and I love to teach this workshop I call Abstracting the Landscape. And I am actually in the process of putting together a couple of online instructional classes. Not quite ready yet, but I'd like to have that going and then just continue with the online stuff once we get back into teaching in person again, to have that as an option. So I'll have all that on my website. But how I teach, I mentioned earlier, is a kind of a culmination of what I've learned from so many different artists. So I can't really say anymore that I teach the Hawthorne-Henchy approach. It's really my own approach now. So this abstracting the landscape workshop that I offer, it's more about teaching less is more. So I try to paint closely related masses, large masses of color, to try to simplify compositions, to sort of build up paintings that way, and paint in the style more of massing in on my darks first, creating a nice design, a pleasing design, and then covering with color and a nice. It's sort of a combination of the Henchy approach and the Bongard approach wrapped up into one.
That's cool. Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So, I'd like to say that we do, I think, often fall into a trap of painting things, spending too much time on things that are unimportant in our painting.
Give us some examples of that.
Well, let's see. So I like to try to work in such a way so that I'm painting the whole painting all at once and not focus on one little thing. So I'm trying to look at what's important and just emphasize just the important. Because, as a viewer, you can't really appreciate all these little details all at once. You really, some of the most beautiful paintings are the most simplistic, with one area that has, one small area that has your interest, your point of interest. So I try not to spend too much time focused on one spot, and work on my whole painting at once. And then I think, the painting should really be deliberately abstract in the beginnings, at least. And this way of working really, really speaks to me, brings me back to my roots of when I fell in love with abstract expressionism. So I mask my shadows in first, helps me determine if I have a strong design, and that's really important, because it's a real bummer if you complete a whole painting and you find out at the end that your design is falling short.
So do you have any particular, I don't like the word rules, but do you have certain things that you follow when you're trying to create a good design?
Yeah. Yeah, rules are meant to be broken. I do know the set of rules that people, teach, and it's always nice to have those sort of in the back of your mind, and then allow yourself to break them once in a while. But one thing I do have is a Fibonacci scale that I carry around in my bag, which is pretty cool.
So you carry like Fibonacci calipers or what?
This is I have to look it up on the internet. I haven't actually seen it out on the market in a while, but it's this wooden caliper that folds up, and you could Google it and find one, I'm sure. But it's really wonderful, and I do use it a lot. So you can quickly discern if you've got, a 50-50 or proportion ratio, that you don't really want to have a 50-50 proportion ratio because your painting might look a little static. 50% white versus 50% shadow, light and shadow, I mean. So I try to use it to proportion like 1/3, 2/3. And it helps me to see if I have any shapes that are too equal drawn shapes, not necessarily, light to dark, but it helps me to see the size, compare the size of each of my shapes, and so it's a wonderful little tool.
Yeah, they're all over the internet. There's all kinds of them. There's some really fancy ones. There's some pretty basic ones, but they all accomplish the same thing, and I think it's a good thing. And do you have any tips in terms of studying the golden triangle or the Fibonacci? Because I think that's a little confusing for some people.
There's so much on the internet. I don't go into that in great depth. I think I actually, a couple years ago in the PleinAir convention, I had a little handout on that. And what I'd like to do is actually put that on my website.
Well, why don't you do that? Why don't you put it on your website, and then everybody can go there and get it. Your website is what?
It's Gray-Weihman.com, and Weihman is Weichman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gray-Weihman.com. All right, I think that's a terrific idea. You put that on your website, and then everybody can go and get it, and you can have an opportunity to explain. And, of course, they can see workshops that you're going to be doing or workshops you're going to be hosting and some other things like that. Yeah. Well, Carole, unfortunately, our time has passed so quickly. I think you and I always have had a tendency to want to just chat for hours, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in person one of these days soon again.
Yeah.
But this has been really fun. It's nice that you have such deliberate intent on the history and understanding the roots of your painting and those who have come before you, and I think it's all pretty cool.
Thanks, Eric. Really enjoyed this. It's been fun.
Yeah, it has been fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate connecting with you and giving me this opportunity to talk to your listeners and share what I'm up to. Thank you. You're welcome.
So I want to remind everybody to go to your website, gray-weihman.com. All right.
That's right.
Carole, thanks for being on the PleinAir Podcast.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Well, thanks again to Carole. And wow, what a great friend. She's very smart and a terrific painter. All around nice person, too. Fun to be around. Anyway, are you guys ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art. Proven techniques to turn your passion into profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I answer your art marketing questions, and you can email yours to eric@artmarketing.com, which also is a resource. Lots of blog posts there on marketing. Here's a question from Omar Schmid in Carlsbad, New Mexico, who says, should we do discounts on our artwork, even with discounts I'm not selling? But I advertised several of my oldest beginner paintings for free, and they were claimed within an hour. Yeah, Omar, don't do that, baby. Look, advertising paintings for free is a great way to never sell another painting because you're establishing that there's no value to them. If you want to give paintings away for free, that's fine. Do it privately, do it quietly, but don't do it publicly, and certainly don't advertise it because that's going to make it harder for you in the future to sell anything. Now, people will take used dental floss for free if you give it to them. So paintings, same thing. But you've got to find people who value paintings. You got to go to the right places. Look, I don't know how you're trying to sell. I can't comment on your discounting, but discounts are not the reason people typically buy. Now, there are people who, if they're in the market for something, they find it for a discount, they'll buy it. But most people won't even spend money on something they don't want if it's discounted. Paintings are emotional. If somebody falls in love and they'll pay what they think is a fair price in their mind. The key is understanding that and matching it. Clearly, discounts can work, but they can also wound you. There's a time and a place, like Nordstrom's does one sale a year. I typically do a Black Friday sale, which is coming up, but I don't normally do discounting. I've been doing it during COVID because everybody needs a break right now, and quite frankly, we need the money too. So we figured that was a win-win, and the artists need the money, so we're helping them. But people who always see you discounting, your price is always going to be a discount price. You might not get them back to pay the full price. So some retail stores do that, right? You know, every time you walk into certain stores, it's always 40% off. And you just know that they're marking it up so they can mark it down. But again, that kind of depends on what you're selling. In the art world, that doesn't tend to happen much. A starting point, Omar, is to find out if your work's any good. Is there somebody out there who can give you critiques of your work, be objective, and don't look for all the good stuff. Look for only the bad stuff. You don't want to hear all the compliments. You want to hear what's wrong with it, and is it marketable, and can you improve it so you can find out if you're ready. Discounts are usually signs of desperation, all right? Giving things away is fine, but don't be public about it. Chances are people who got them were not in the position to be cash buyers anyway, but they'll take them for free. So the other thing is, do you really want paintings out there that you did early that have your name and your signature on them? Be careful about that because they will haunt you down the road. Right? Someone will show up in auction or something, and then you'll be like, ooh, I want that out of the market. I'm not proud of that. Right? So you got to find a market. You got to find a place to sell your work and to be seen by buyers who appreciate fine art. I can help you with that by reading my book. I think that's a good place to start. There's a question from Lee Brandt in Evansville, Indiana. Lee, I'm from Indiana. Lee says, can you speak to overcoming the fear of rejection when exposing your artwork to the public or a gallery? Oh, Lee, I'm all over that because I am like Mr. Rejection. I was talking to a psychotherapist today, and she told me that the number one problem is lacking self-esteem. Self-esteem, of course, can be situational. There are some people I'm totally confident around. I could stand in front of 1,000 of them and dance on stage and not have any problem. And there are others I'm like shy and reserved around. I know that's hard to believe, but, depends on certain levels of respect or where they came from. Some of my early mentors and people that I looked up to, I'm still a little intimidated by some of those. So, and there's just certain people. So keep in mind it's situational. When I first put my work in a gallery, I was uncomfortable and I was making lots of excuses and I was insecure. It felt very unlike me. A rejection is really fear. But why do you fear it? Why don't you embrace rejection? Can you flip it around and say, I actually want rejection? Now, why would you do that? Well, first, you know that every painting has a special person for it, right? It's not going to appeal to everyone, just like not every painting appeals to you. Paintings are emotional reminders, memories, childhood places, things like that. They're not going to appeal to everybody. And so let's say that you know this and you know that you're going to appeal only to 1 out of 20 people. Well, as soon as you get those 19 people to reject you, maybe you get to the 20th and you get to a sale sooner. So the faster you can get the rejection, that way you'll embrace it. You'll say, okay, I got a rejection. Good. Check that off. Next. That way you're closer to a sale. Does that make sense? All right. A friend of mine is a sales trainer. She stuffs her pockets with $100 bills. And she says to a person, okay, ask me for the order. And every time she says no, she says, take one of those $100 bills. And then, they ask for the order 20 times. She finally says yes, and they get to keep all the $100 bills they plucked off of her. I think the idea is to make the example that you got to ask a lot. You got to be willing to ask and for an order. And so some of that is training that you could stand to have, when you're dealing with artwork. We're always, or at least often, insecure about our artwork. It's normal, but why? Well, maybe we don't think we're good enough. And if that's the case, if we're insecure about our work, then maybe we need to have it evaluated, to look at it and say, is it good enough? Should we be out there yet? Can we improve? And always look for ways you can grow and improve. That's why videos and workshops and seminars and conventions and things like that are really, really helpful. Don't think of this as rejecting you. They're not rejecting you. They're just not clicking with that particular painting. It's nothing personal. So as soon as you understand that, embrace that, the faster you're going to get beyond that fear. People are generally kind. They want you to succeed. Look for the bright side in everything, and don't look at them as being critical of you or your painting. It just hasn't appealed to them. Embrace failure as lessons that bring you closer to the success that you want. I think I could write a whole book about that topic. Well, that's the Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Hey, don't forget to sign up for Watercolor Live at watercolorlive.com. Remember, there's a November 30th deadline on that, and on PleinAir Salon at pleinAirsalon.com. And you should sign up for the PleinAir Convention while you're waiting for it. And if we can't hold it, of course, there will be refunds available. So go ahead and get signed up so you get one of the seats, because I have a hunch there's going to be high demand this year if we're allowed out. If you've not seen my blog where I talk about art, life, and other things, check it out. It's called Sunday Coffee. You can find it at coffeewitheric.com. Comes out free every Sunday. Just sign up at coffeewitheric.com. Well, this is fun. We'll do it again sometime, like next week, God willing. We'll see you then. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. You can find that on the newsstands, and you can find us at outdoorpainter.com. And of course, you can get a subscription there or at pleinairmagazine.com. Remember, it is a great, big, beautiful world, and it is deserving of being painted, and you need to go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.